3 years. That's how long it had been since Kang Jae-ho, the ruthless Korean billionaire and secret mafia boss, divorced his wife in the most humiliating way possible. He thought he had buried her memory forever. Until tonight, at the biggest charity gala of the year, she walked through the doors wearing a breathtaking white gown. More beautiful, more powerful, and more untouchable than ever before. And for the first time in 3 years, Kang Jae-ho froze. Hey family, before we get into this story, go ahead and like the video, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Trust me, you're going to want to stay till the end of this one. The ballroom was filled with Seoul's elite, billionaires, politicians, and underworld figures disguised in designer suits. I walked in alone. My long white gown flowed elegantly as I moved through the crowd. Heads turned. Whispers followed. But I kept my chin high, my steps confident. 3 years ago, I left this world broken. Tonight, I returned as someone else. From across the room, I felt his eyes on me before I even saw him. Kang Jae-ho, the man who had publicly divorced me, the man who had humiliated me in front of everyone, the man who once told me I was too ordinary for his world. Now he stood frozen near the center of the ballroom, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring at me like he was seeing a ghost. Our eyes met. For a moment, the entire world disappeared. I didn't smile. I didn't look away. I simply held his gaze with calm, cold power. He looked different too. Still devastatingly handsome, but there were new shadows under his eyes. His jaw was tighter. The once untouchable Korean billionaire now carried visible tension. A beautiful woman stood beside him, trying to get his attention. He didn't even glance at her. His eyes remained locked on me. I continued walking slowly through the crowd, accepting greetings from people who once ignored me. 3 years of quiet revenge, smart investments, and building my own empire had changed everything. I was no longer the woman he discarded. I was the woman who rose. Jae-ho finally started moving toward me, cutting through the crowd like a man possessed. When he reached me, he stopped just inches away. His voice was low, almost hoarse. Sasha. I tilted my head slightly, looking up at him with a small, calm smile. Hello, Jae-ho. It's been a long time. He swallowed hard, his eyes scanning my face as if searching for the woman he once broke. You look. He couldn't finish the sentence. I finished it for him. Different. He nodded slowly. I leaned in slightly and whispered. Good. Because the woman you threw away 3 years ago died that night. I stepped back, still smiling softly. And the woman standing in front of you now is someone you can never touch again. The Korean billionaire who once owned everything now looked like he had just lost everything. 3 years after being humiliated and divorced, would you come back stronger? Drop a like if you love comeback stories. The ballroom remained silent. Every eye moved between me and Kang Jae-ho. 3 years ago, these same people had watched him divorce me. 3 years ago, they had whispered that I would never recover. Now they were staring at me as if I had returned from the dead. Jae-ho couldn't take his eyes off me. The woman beside him finally grabbed his arm. Jae-ho. Nothing. He didn't respond. His attention remained fixed on me. For the first time, the powerful billionaire looked completely lost. I picked up a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and calmly took a sip. The crowd parted around me. People who once ignored me were suddenly eager to speak. Investors, executives, even politicians. 3 years had changed many things, especially my status. What happened to her? Someone whispered. Didn't she disappear after the divorce? I heard she owns companies in Busan now. No. I heard she bought an entire luxury hotel group. The rumor spread quickly. I let them. The truth was even bigger. Jae-ho finally stepped closer. Close enough for only me to hear him. You never answered my messages. I looked at him calmly. You sent them 2 years too late. His jaw tightened. The answer clearly hurt. Good. For years I had been the one hurting. Tonight he would understand what it felt like. A flash of cameras suddenly exploded across the ballroom. Reporters had arrived. One reporter immediately pointed toward me. That's her. The woman who built the Aurora Group. What? Several guests turned in shock. The Aurora Group wasn't just successful. It was one of the fastest-growing luxury investment companies in Asia. Its owner had remained anonymous. Until now. Jae-ho's face changed. For the first time all evening, genuine shock appeared in his eyes. The Aurora Group, he said quietly. I smiled. Surprised. He stared at me. 3 years ago, he thought I was too ordinary for his world. Meanwhile, I had quietly built a bigger empire than anyone expected. Across the ballroom, I noticed several underworld figures watching. Their expressions were respectful, careful, almost nervous, because there was one secret nobody in this room knew. Not yet. Not even Jae-ho. The Aurora Group was only part of my success. The real truth was far more dangerous. And when it finally came out, the entire city would be talking about it. Jae-ho looked at me as if he were seeing a stranger. But I wasn't a stranger. I was the woman he had once loved, the woman he had once betrayed, and the woman he was beginning to realize he never truly forgot. The problem was simple. Some mistakes can't be undone, and some people only realize what they lost after it's gone forever. The ballroom buzzed with whispers long after our conversation ended. I could feel eyes following me wherever I went. 3 years ago, those same people had watched me leave in humiliation. Tonight, they watched me return in triumph. But I wasn't here for their attention. I was here for something else. Something much bigger. Jae-ho watched me from across the room. The more he looked, the more confused he became. The woman standing before him was nothing like the wife he remembered. The old Sasha had trusted too easily. The old Sasha had loved too deeply. The old Sasha had cried when he broke her heart. That woman no longer existed. A well-known billionaire approached me with a smile. Miss Sasha, it's an honor to finally meet you in person. The surrounding guests immediately fell silent. Several of them recognized the man. He was one of Seoul's most influential investors. And yet he was treating me with obvious respect. Jae-ho noticed. His expression darkened. The investor handed me a document. I reviewed the proposal. Aurora Group will officially become our largest partner. A wave of shock spread through the crowd. Largest partner? People began whispering again. Even Jae-ho looked stunned, because the company being discussed was one he had been trying to acquire for nearly a year, and he had failed. I signed the document calmly, then handed it back. The billionaire smiled. Congratulations. The deal was done. Just like that. The opportunity Jae-ho wanted now belonged to me. For the first time that night, Jae-ho stepped directly into my path. His voice was low. You knew I wanted that company. I met his gaze. Business is business. His jaw tightened. You're doing this intentionally. I took a sip of champagne. No. I smiled softly. I'm simply taking opportunities you failed to recognize. The words hit harder than any insult, because we both knew I wasn't only talking about business. For a moment neither of us spoke. The tension between us was impossible to ignore. Then he quietly asked, "Were you happy?" The question surprised me. I looked at him carefully. What? During those 3 years? His voice was almost vulnerable. Were you happy without me? For a second memories flashed through my mind. The divorce. The betrayal. The sleepless nights. The struggle of rebuilding my life. Then the victories. The success. The freedom. The strength. I looked him directly in the eyes. Happier than I ever was, waiting for someone to choose me. The answer left him speechless. Across the ballroom, several powerful guests suddenly stood up as one. Their attention wasn't on Jae-ho. It wasn't on the investors. It was on me. They bowed their heads respectfully. The room went silent. Confusion spread everywhere. Even Jae-ho looked shocked. Why would people that powerful show me that level of respect? No one knew. Not yet. But very soon, the city of Seoul would discover a secret powerful enough to shake both the business world and the underworld. And when that secret was revealed, everything would change. The silence after the bow didn't last long. Cracked like glass. Whispers exploded across the ballroom. Why are they bowing to her? Is she royalty? No, that's impossible. Jae-ho stood completely still. His eyes locked on me like he was trying to solve a puzzle that no longer made sense. Because I wasn't just a woman who returned wealthy. I was something else entirely. A sudden voice came from the entrance. Chairwoman Sasha Kim has arrived. The entire room froze. Even the music stopped. Even the chandeliers seemed louder in the silence. I didn't react. I simply turned slightly toward the entrance. And that was when the real shift began. A line of executives entered behind me. All of them bowed as they passed, one by one, respectfully, fearfully, like I wasn't a guest, but the owner of the entire room. Jaeho's expression finally broke. Chairwoman? His voice was low, confused, almost disbelieving. He took a step forward. What does that mean? I finally faced him fully. My expression calm, controlled, unshakable. It means what it sounds like. I paused slightly. I own Aurora Group, and the companies that funded half of this event tonight. A sharp inhale went through the crowd. Someone dropped a glass. It shattered on the floor. No one moved to clean it. Jaeho's eyes darkened. You hid this from me. I tilted my head slightly. No. A small pause. You just never cared enough to find out who I really was. That hit harder than any slap. For the first time, something unfamiliar flickered in his eyes. Regret. Not loud, not dramatic, but real. Across the room, his female companion tried to hold onto his arm again, but he didn't even notice her anymore. His attention stayed on me, like the world had narrowed down to one person. Then I turned slightly away, ready to leave. But before I could take a step, he spoke again, lower this time, almost broken. Sasha, wait. I stopped, but I didn't turn back, because for the first time, I had the power to decide whether I would. The name Chairwoman Sasha Kim didn't fade from the room. It echoed, over and over, like a warning no one had expected to hear tonight. Jaeho stood motionless. For the first time, the Korean billionaire who controlled half the city looked like he had lost control of something far more important. His gaze stayed on me, not as a businessman, not as an enemy, but as a man realizing something too late. I finally turned back to him. Slowly, calmly, completely in control. You wanted the woman who depended on you, I said softly. A pause. But she doesn't exist anymore. His voice came lower, almost strained. When did you become this? I didn't answer immediately, because the truth wasn't simple. It wasn't one moment. It was every moment he ignored me. Every time I was invisible. Every time I was replaceable. I became this, I said quietly, the moment you decided I wasn't worth fighting for. Silence hit him harder than any accusation. Behind him, his business partner whispered urgently, Jaeho, we need to leave. If she really controls Aurora Group. But he didn't move. He couldn't. Because now the truth was spreading through the room. Investors were checking their phones. Executives were panicking. And slowly the realization settled in. The woman he discarded wasn't just successful. She was now untouchable. Jaeho finally stepped closer again. This time his voice wasn't cold. It was lower, heavier. Sasha. I didn't know. I looked at him for a long moment, then replied softly, you never tried to know. A pause. The distance between us felt bigger than the entire ballroom. Then he said something no one expected. Can we talk alone? For the first time, his voice didn't sound like a billionaire. It sounded like someone afraid of losing something they only just realized they still wanted. I studied him carefully. The man who once ended our marriage without hesitation. The man who never looked back. Now standing in front of me. Asking. Not demanding. Not controlling. Asking. And for the first time that night, I didn't immediately walk away. The air between us felt heavier now. Jaeho didn't move. Neither did I. But everything around us kept changing. Phones were still buzzing. People were still whispering. And his empire was quietly shaking in real time. Talk, I finally said. My voice was calm. Too calm. He nodded slightly. Yes. A pause. Just 5 minutes. I studied him. The man who once made decisions without hesitation. Now asking me for time. Not power. Not control. Just time. I stepped slightly closer, but not enough to close the distance fully, because I needed him to feel it. The space between us now. The gap he created. What would you say in those 5 minutes? I asked softly. His jaw tightened. I would explain. I tilted my head slightly. Explain what? He looked down for a second, for the first time unsure. Everything. That answer almost made me smile. Almost. But I didn't. Because explanations don't fix 3 years of silence. Across the room, security began shifting. Executives were leaving early. Investors were already making calls. And I knew what was happening. The empire around him was reacting to me. Not him. Me. Jae-ho noticed it too. His eyes moved briefly toward the chaos forming in his world. Then back to me. He was losing control of everything. But still standing here. Still choosing to look at me. "You didn't come back just to punish me," he said quietly. I didn't answer immediately. Because that wasn't fully true. But it also wasn't fully false. "I came back," I finally said. "Because I stopped disappearing for people who never saw me." A pause. "And you were the first one." That hit him harder than anything else tonight. Because it wasn't anger. It wasn't revenge. It was truth. For the first time, Jae-ho looked like he didn't know how to win anymore. Only how to lose something he never thought he would. Me. The ballroom had almost emptied. Only a few guests remained, still pretending not to watch. But everyone was watching. Jae-ho stood in front of me one last time. The noise of his collapsing world felt far away now. All that remained was silence between us. "I don't want to lose you again," he finally said. His voice was lower than before. No arrogance. No control. Just honesty. I looked at him carefully. 3 years ago, those words would have broken me. Now they didn't even shake me. "You didn't lose me," I said softly. "You let me go." A pause. "And I survived it." His eyes tightened. "Sasha." But I raised my hand slightly, stopping him. Not out of anger, but finality. "I didn't come back for revenge alone," I said. "I came back to see if you would still recognize me when I stopped being the version you created in your head." Silence. He didn't answer. Because he couldn't. Then I turned slightly toward the exit. But stopped one last time. Not looking back yet. Just speaking. "If you ever truly loved me." A pause. "Then you'll understand why I can't stay." I walked away. Slow. Calm. Unshaken. For the first time in his life, Kang Jae-ho didn't chase. Because he finally understood something worse than loss. Regret. And outside the ballroom, a new chapter was already waiting for me. Not as his wife. Not as his past. But as a woman who had finally become unstoppable. If you were her, would you walk away forever or give him one last chance to explain? Comment love or revenge below. 6 months later, Seoul had moved on. The headlines had changed. The gossip had faded. But some stories refused to die. I stood inside my office on the top floor of Aurora Tower, looking out at the city skyline. The empire I had built was thriving. New partnerships. New investments. New opportunities. Everything I once dreamed of had become reality. And for the first time in years, I was truly happy. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. My assistant entered carrying a small envelope. This was delivered personally, chairwoman. I looked down. No company logo. No business seal. Just my name. Written in familiar handwriting. Kang Jae-ho. For a moment I simply stared at it. Then I opened it. Inside was a single letter. Only a few lines. "Sasha, I spent years believing success could replace love. I was wrong. Losing you taught me that. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect another chance. I only hope you're happy. Because despite everything, you were the best thing that ever happened to me. Jae-ho." The room became quiet. I read the letter twice. Then folded it carefully. 6 months ago, those words would have changed everything. Now they changed nothing. Not because I hated him. Not because I wanted revenge. But because I had finally healed. I walked toward the window again. The city stretched endlessly below. Beautiful. Bright. Full of possibilities. My phone buzzed. A message appeared. A dinner invitation from a powerful investor I had recently met. Someone intelligent. Respectful. Someone who saw me for who I was. Not who I used to be. A small smile touched my lips. Life had a funny way of moving forward. I looked one last time at Jae-ho's letter. Then placed it inside a drawer. Not as a reminder of pain. But as proof of how far I had come. The woman who walked into that ballroom years ago had been heartbroken. The woman standing here now was unstoppable. And this time, her future belonged entirely to her. What do you think? Should Sasha have given Jae-ho a second chance? Or was walking away forever the right decision? Tell me in the comments. 3 months after the letter, Kang Jae-ho still couldn't forget her. No matter how hard he tried. No matter how many meetings he attended. No matter how many cities he traveled to. Everywhere he went, something reminded him of Sasha. The coffee she used to order. The songs she quietly hummed. The seat she always chose by the window. The woman he once took for granted had somehow become the memory he couldn't escape. One rainy evening in Busan, Jae-ho attended a high-profile business conference. The room was filled with executives and investors from across Asia. He wasn't expecting surprises. He was wrong. Because when the ballroom doors opened, Sasha walked in. She wore an elegant ivory suit instead of a gown. Professional, powerful, untouchable. The room immediately shifted toward her. People greeted her. Investors stood to shake her hand. Executives waited for her attention. Jae-ho watched everything, and every second hurt. Because years ago, that woman had stood beside him. Now she stood above him. For a brief moment their eyes met. The same eyes, the same connection, the same unfinished history. But this time, Sasha smiled politely, the kind of smile you give a stranger. Nothing more, nothing less. That hurt more than anger, more than revenge, more than rejection. Because for the first time Jae-ho realized something terrifying. She wasn't trying to punish him anymore. She had simply moved on. Later that night after the conference ended, fate placed them alone on a rooftop terrace overlooking the ocean. Rain tapped softly against the glass walls. The city lights shimmered across the water. Neither spoke at first. Then Jae-ho finally broke the silence. Do you ever think about us? Sasha looked out at the ocean. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she answered honestly. Sometimes. His heart tightened. Only sometimes? A small smile appeared on her lips. The pain disappeared a long time ago. The word struck him harder than any business loss. Because pain meant there was still a connection. No pain meant healing. And healing meant freedom. For the first time Jae-ho understood. The woman he loved wasn't coming back. Not because she couldn't, but because she no longer needed to. As Sasha walked away toward the elevator, he remained standing alone beneath the city lights. Watching, remembering, regretting, and finally accepting that some love stories don't end with reunion. They end with growth. And perhaps, that was the lesson he deserved all along.
If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to Fallen Empire Stories for more emotional revenge, betrayal, and powerful comeback stories. Because every fallen empire has a story, and some revenge stories are only beginning.